Welcome to Tech in Translation, the podcast where we break down the complexities of today's most innovative technologies into something we can all understand.
Brought to you by Ironbow Technologies, a next-generation solutions provider. We're committed to helping our customers across the government, education, commercial, and healthcare sectors turn their tech challenges into real, actionable outcomes.
At Ironbow, we believe that technology should be a tool for empowerment, not a source of confusion.
That's why each episode of Tech in Translation is designed to demystify the latest trends, tools, and technologies, making them accessible for everyone, whether you're a seasoned professional or just tech curious.
Join us as we translate complex tech into everyday language, one episode at a time. Welcome back to Tech in Translation. I'm your host for today, Fran Alatros Ukejiofo. In this episode, we're diving into how IT leaders can rethink hardware refresh cycles, minimize tech waste, and deliver a better employee experience, all while navigating tight budgets. Joining us is Larry Meadows, product strategist on the digital solutions team at HP. Larry's work focuses on using telemetry and employee usage data to drive smarter IT investments. We'll talk about how IT and HR are converging, how to reduce refresh costs without compromising performance, and why every device should be matched to the person, not just the role. Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go ahead and kick things off with the big picture. As I'm sure you know and you've encountered, IT leaders are under a lot of pressure to do more with less. So from your perspective, what's driving the need to rethink how we manage IT, hardware, and investment?
Thanks, Fran, and appreciate you guys inviting me to join. It's an interesting time in IT right now. Globally, we see budget constraints. There's the constant theory of do more with less. And it's being done at a time where 5 years post-COVID, we still have a very hybrid or even sometimes mostly remote workforce. We have almost three versions of every employee at each organization: the employee working from home, the employee on the go, or the employee in the office. And they're also accessing across more devices than ever before. No longer is it just from the PC, but many are accessing it from their mobile phones. Many have tablets, iPads, or other tablets. And our end users are expecting a seamless experience. They don't care where they're at. They don't care what they're accessing from. They just want to get their work done. And at the same time, it creates a barrier to delivering a secure experience for the company, for IT leaders to have to deliver against. And these challenges, I think, are continuing to grow in a manner that is forcing IT to rethink how they're investing, the technology and the tools that they're using, and even the training programs required to ensure that the end users have access to what they need in order to perform their jobs.
So a lot to take in there. And I think the pressure is ever more on the employees and the end users to perform in a multitude of different distributed environments. And then, of course, on the IT teams to deliver, as you said, that seamless experience. So I'm excited to kind of dive into that. At some point in earlier conversations, you've said that the traditional 3 or 4 year refresh model is outdated. Why does that approach no longer work in today's environment that you described?
A lot of it comes down to budget and in all honesty, waste. We buy PCs for ourselves to use at our homes, and it's very rare that somebody replaces their PC at home every 3 years. But we created a capitalization model in which we looked at our hardware assets were going to be replaced at a specific cycle. And many companies use 3 years for laptops and 4 years for desktops. What that means is every year I'm replacing a third of my laptops. But we live in a world now where telemetry allows us to understand which devices are actually still performing really well, meeting the needs of the end user, which ones have memory or CPU utilization issues, and which ones maybe are running out of disk space, the battery health of the devices. And this kind of data lets IT leaders make decisions around what devices need to be replaced versus what devices are 3 years old. That also means sometimes a device might be getting replaced when it's 2 years old because it's just not meeting the needs of the end user in terms of what they're doing. And one of the value that a group like Ironbow can bring to your customers is the ability to start to identify These are the devices that need to be replaced because of CPU or memory overutilization issues that there's not a fix for. We cannot add more memory, or it's already maxed out, or the usage pattern. And if we take that data and then we also use telemetry to identify how people are actually working. Yes, they're in finance, or yes, they're in marketing, but what programs are they using? What are the behaviors that they have? Like they always have 50 browser tabs open, or multiple windows of Edge or Chrome, or insert browser name here, and start to create this persona model where you can identify the usage patterns of people and map what is the best device to help them meet the needs of remaining productive and stop over purchasing. And in many cases, we'll find devices that may not be good for Larry, but would be perfect for Fran, and can be refurbished and repurposed in order to help build a better sustainability view. And what we found internally, even at HP, because we started this in 2020 when there were supply chain issues and it was harder to get PCs for everybody, and we prioritized customers, we reduced our PC refresh costs by over 20%.
Oh, wow.
And when you start looking at how you can use telemetry to understand not who wants a new PC, but who needs a new PC in order to be productive and deliver against what they're doing, then it really helps make more informed decisions around which ones we're going to replace and what we're going to replace them with in order to help get more mileage out of every dollar in the IT budget.
Sounds a lot more efficient, cost effective. I think everyone's happier in that scenario. Plus the 20% I think you mentioned in cost savings. Amazing. I want to get more into some examples, but before we dive into that, Larry, I want to back up a second, because I think our IT folks in the audience, our tech folks, understand telemetry and what it means, the definition, just high level for maybe folks who don't understand what that is. Can you just give a simple explanation definition?
Absolutely. Telemetry is data. It's performance data. It's what's happening with the technology that's deployed. What is its battery health? What is its discharge rate, its recharge rate? What's the full charge capacity, or FCC, of a battery that's in devices? CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk space, even network status. It's all of the data around how the device is performing that lets you start to identify what areas of the device are performing well and which areas might not be performing as well, right? Maybe you have 8 or 16 gig machines deployed and you're using data or telemetry to identify that these are the ones that are suffering the most memory overutilization. Well, if they can take an upgrade to 24 or 32 gig, that's a whole lot less expensive than replacing the entire machine. So that telemetry, or that data about the performance metrics of the technology that's deployed, is what's going to help IT leaders make those informed choices. Just like marketing would do if they're looking at where they want to place marketing materials or where they want to go after MQLs, and they do this in a data-driven format. IT people are even more inclined to use data to make informed decisions and understand where they're going. And that's what telemetry is. Telemetry is that data that underlies and informs the decision-making process.
I love that. And you're speaking my language there. So love that as well. And I especially appreciate you were mentioning Iron Bow and our partnership from an HP perspective. And you outlined some really great example of success at HP using telemetry and this model. Can you share some more examples about the kinds of impact that needs-based refreshes have had on cost and productivity?
Absolutely. When you start taking an approach that's focused on that automated collection of data to analyze and pull it in, it's not only just about the PC itself and maybe how that PC is performing. It could also be about, do they have the right peripheral set? If you're doing a PC refresh and you're sending it out, are you making sure that the docking station that's already deployed is compatible with the new PC that they're getting? Are you making sure that the peripherals that they already have in place are going to continue to work, or are we going to create a friction point that's going to be a frustration for the end user when they're trying to onboard? But even bring it internally. If we can understand what's happening with these devices and analyze that data, that means we can return some alerts or some recommended actions around what can be done in order to improve it, right? So how can we identify things? We mentioned CPU and memory utilization, but it could even be things like a security vulnerability. Antivirus is disabled, firewalls disabled, BitLockers disabled, and re-enable those kinds of items. And how could you start to identify these trends that are impacting performance before they become a support ticket? Before they go to the support desk saying, hey, I need someone to remote into my machine and take an action on this, or we need to set an appointment at the tech cafe. If we can start to identify these issues before they lead to the support ticket and take an action to resolve that or minimize the risk of the impact of that hitting productivity, then you can start to reduce those elements, like what are the reactive elements hitting the support desk? And how can you reduce those costs? How can you reduce the workload on your support team because you have some proactive items that are impacting users that you can address, allowing the support team to be more focused on the problem management, change management, and incident response of the issues that are already out there happening and improving. And we've seen that across the board, right? We see people using telemetry to identify unused software and reclaiming those licenses, which, a couple of customers that I've worked with have saved. One was $90,000, another was $120,000 a year in unused software licenses that they were able to reclaim and pull back and then either redeploy or reduce their burden on the licenses that they were purchasing. And those are real dollars when you start thinking about that. And the ability to protect the service desk to be focused on the most pressing problems impacting the most number of people, where you're avoiding I'll call it the ticket addiction that service desk can have or people can have because they no longer have to open a service ticket to get their antivirus updated or to address an issue related to memory utilization. You can use telemetry and tools to automatically drive those remediations before it becomes part of that ticket addiction that we see across the world, actually.
I love that. I think Stop the Ticket Addiction is a campaign there in itself. So love that. And I really like the examples of benefits you painted, really protecting the IT teams and the support teams. So shifting gears a little bit here and focusing on the employee experience, the end users, how does that look in practice when you're matching the right devices to the right users based on how they work, not just their job titles? What does that actually look like in practice?
It's an interesting thought process to go through, and some of it was driven by some internal research that we did that we call the workforce relationship index or the work relationship index. And one of our question sets in that was talking around, do you feel you have the right tools and technology to do your job? And our responses told us that 74% of workers said that they don't feel that the workplace they're in has the equipment or the technology and the space that they need to be successful.
Oh, wow.
So that's the laptops, that could be mobile devices, that's the collaboration rooms in there. So when you start taking that into consideration and you start thinking about, okay, well, why do they feel that they don't have the right tools to do their job? Well, are they a person who is in engineering, but they're really not an engineer? They're more of a product manager or a product owner who spends more time talking to customers, maybe going to customer events or analyst events and working across things. But we've given them a really powerful workstation because engineering staff gets a really powerful workstation for writing code, compiling code, and doing the work that they do. But the person who is in more of a product management or a product owner type role needs a lower device. Well, they would be unhappy if they have a device that weighs over 7 pounds that they're expected to put in their backpack and run through airports and TSA when they could be on a device like an EliteBook that weighs a whole lot less, 2 pounds, is a whole lot more mobile and easier to use on a plane than a 15-inch laptop. That opens up, and we've all been there when the seat reclines a little bit in front of us, and that makes it harder to keep your device open.
Yikes, yes.
We're all in the same cramped space in that airplane. So, right, it's, everyone wants to lean back, everyone wants to be comfortable. How do we make sure that the tool for the person who's the road warrior in engineering is the right one that they need for how they do work? How do we make sure that the person in finance that wants the most powerful workstation that they can get because it's 30 seconds faster in calculating quarterly results than a regular Elite book is actually tied back to the fact that 99% of the work you do is actually this. And the right device for doing that is here. So we kind of do two things. We want to look at how do we make sure that the device that's placed in the hands of Fran is going to make Fran happy because it's easy for her to carry around when she's traveling. It's easier for her to do the work that she needs to do. It has enough memory that it performs fairly flawlessly. It's easy to connect things to, but at the same time is the right device for IT in order to manage the IT asset, the life cycle of that asset and the budget that is going into it on a quarterly basis. And that's really the balance, right? How do we make sure Fran's productive and has the right tools while also making sure that we're making the right investments to protect the increasing budget constraints that I see from companies across the board. And really that's what it comes down to is how do we make sure that the tools we're deploying are the right tools for the person based on how they work.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, from the telemetry and insights standpoint, for be it Fran in marketing, the road warriors you mentioned, finance, what insights are most valuable to understand whether someone has the right tool or not, or if they're silently struggling with that issue?
I think it's kind of threefold, Fran, in all honesty. It's looking at the devices not only from a performance statement. I've mentioned CPU or memory utilization a lot already, but also how it's being used. What are the applications that the person uses? Are they actually using a programming? Are they using a lot of AI? Are they really more of an office productivity user who's in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint all the time? How often are they on a SaaS app versus an installed application? And understanding the tools that they use to do their job. And then kind of that third leg of the stool comes in from the standpoint of, I'm going to call it, the functional aspect, right? Is it the device that is going to help them connect wherever they're at? Does it have the right technology inside of it? And is the form factor of that device work in the manner in which they work? I love picking up myself. And I mentioned the engineering example earlier. So, 2 years ago when I went into the role that I still sit in now, at that time, my role was underneath of engineering and it was classified as an engineering role. So I was actually given a really wonderful PC. It was about 2.5 years ago. It was a ZBook Fury 15 workstation, HP device, wonderful device. It could do anything that I wanted it to do. And if I wrote code and were compiling programs, or if I spent any time in GitHub or, doing code analysis and other items, it would have probably been a great device for me. But I travel about half of the time. And the device does weigh a little bit over 7 pounds. Does not feel good when you're throwing it in the backpack and you're trying to get places fast. And the 15-inch laptop doesn't open well. So when I talk about opening up the 15-inch laptop and the person leaning back a little bit in front of you, it's because I've been there. I've been in that seat where that happens and it's like, okay, how do I reconfigure myself now to work? I also don't use engineering programs, right? I meet up with a lot of customers and analysts and partners and others. And I actually use OneNote a lot. I use it a lot for how I capture what's happening in the various meetings that I'm in. I spend more time in Power BI than I do any coding program at all. I spend a lot of time in PowerPoint and Excel and web apps, and I am the one who has 50 tabs open at any given time that can impact the performance of the machine. So when you look at me and you say I'm engineering and you give me that ZBook Fury 15 workstation, I'm not happy because it's heavy. It's hard to use on a plane. It didn't have the best camera that's connected to it. I'm forgetful. I'm the first person to leave without my headset. So I'm trying to find a nice quiet place that I can get into and be on the call like we're talking now without a headset that's handy. And when we looked at what I work and what I do, the idea was not, does he need a new PC? Well, based on the telemetry, no. But when we talk to Larry, he's not happy with what he has. And why isn't he happy? Well, it weighs 7 pounds. I'm always on planes. I'm always working remote. And the best device for me, based on the applications that I use, at that time, I was put on an EliteBook X 1040 X360. Wonderful machine. Weighs 2 pounds. folds over into a tablet, has a pen. So when I'm using OneNote in a meeting, I'm actually writing like I'm writing on a tablet, as opposed to standing there typing the notes into OneNote. Because you've probably been in the meetings that I've been, Fran, where someone opens up the laptop and starts typing, and literally nobody thinks, oh, look, they're taking notes in OneNote. You always
Exactly.
think they're multitasking or something else. So the form factor actually for me was so much better because it let me be non-distracting in the meetings. Also meant I could fold it into a tablet when I'm working on a plane. And the weight was a whole lot easier for me to move around. So that entire idea of every company is going to have personas that they're working within, but how do we go beyond the persona that is the company's persona and create a usage base based on their hardware profile? Are they always docked? Are they always external displays? Are they always a heavy storage user or software? What are the software applications that they use that tell us about how they are and how they work? And then mapping that to the right device for their needs. We've also found that that is a driver of cost savings because now I'm not overbuying PCs for people based on where they sit or their internal persona. I'm buying PCs based on the work that they actually do and what best meets the expectation that they might have based on the work that they do.
Which is, I'm sure, something that top level leaders and CFOs and the finance leaders are like love to hear. Again, just really matching efficiencies, and it's not about just giving all your employees the latest, fanciest, gadgets and latest and greatest. It doesn't matter, right? It's more dependent on the role and usage. So very interesting about that opportunity there to kind of improve that collaboration between the end user and IT. And I want to go into kind of how this could break down those functional silos. So traditionally, we know that IT, HR, facilities all often operate in their own silos. So what are some opportunities and why is it important for these departments to collaborate here, especially in, our new hybrid work environments?
Some of the recent research that I've seen where they have interviewed end users actually showed that the CIO is the second most influential person around the experience that employees say that they have
That's
at a
huge.
company. And that's the employee saying that. And I think it's because they know that after the CEO, the CIO is the one who's making the investments in the tools and the technology that are going to help them do their job. And so what does that mean? It's a really interesting time when you think that, a lot of times companies will build a collaboration room, but that's part of real estate, right? That's just part of the office. We've got a collab room that seats 8 and has this, poly collab solution sitting inside of it. But how's that room actually being used? How often is that room actually being used as a true collaboration room with all of the cameras on and talking around people? And how often is it used as someone just booked it because they wanted a private room to get some work done in through there? And how often is that room used in a manner that lets you see which participants in the meeting that may be remote are having a good experience or a bad experience or a poor experience, what's causing it, as well as what's happening in that room in real time? So this is an opportunity for IT to help facilities deliver better environments in which to get their work done. And the same thing could be said about individual pods. On some of the HP campuses, we have those, I'll call it the micro pod that I can go into and it closes the door and I'm in a little area. It's all glass and I can take my calls and I can do what I need and I'm not disturbing the people around me. Well, what's the efficiency of that? How well is that actual room performing? How often is it used? What kinds of meetings are being used for? Are they meetings without video, with video? And how are those being set up? There was an article last month in CIO Magazine about how Moderna, the pharmaceutical company, has just combined their HR and IT departments underneath of a single leader.
Oh, wow.
And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because are there any two departments that have a greater impact on employees than HR and IT? HR's helping to recruit them, getting them their benefits, making sure that they have set up, getting them onboarded. IT's making sure they're onboarded to the technology, that they have the right device on day one, that they have the tools they need to be successful. And they are so intertwined in terms of the happiness of the employee. that it made a lot of sense to me when I read that about, but it also surprised me because pharmaceutical companies are not ones that I think about that are on the cutting edge of doing anything with technology and all there. But when we look at that, what I see is the usage and leveraging of telemetry allows an IT leader to do three or four things. One, they want to partner with HR and they want to be able to show HR, hey, here's all the people that we brought in. Here's the feedback that we're seeing from them in terms of how satisfied they are with the tools and everything they have to do their job, which HR is going to care about because they're the ones looking at retention rates. Now, IT is helping inform some of the retention rates and what's going on. Well, now let's take it a step further. What if IT can actually look at people who maybe be identified as a low performer and identify that there is a barrier to some of the tools that they have, and maybe they haven't had the right training or they don't have access to the right tools in order to accomplish their job? Is there something that we can do from an IT perspective that will allow that user to actually flourish versus, just flounder? Because there's a big investment made in bringing people onto companies. And how do we move that forward? But then using telemetry to identify the right investments to make makes the IT group, makes the CIO a true partner with the CFO, who's then showing him, here's how we're investing the allocated budget that we have. And here's the return on that investment, because we're now able to see things like the productivity, the usage of our facility rooms, the usage of those micropods, the engagement level of employees and how well they feel ingrained into the company culture. And then they tie that back up. And now you've got IT leadership looking at how they're business partners with the finance office, with the HR office, with facilities. And you can continue to take that further because there's no point of any company nowadays that is not impacted somehow by technology. And technology is likely going to be the driver between how successful or unsuccessful that department is.
That is so huge. I mean, just really interesting that IT can even play such an essential role in, obviously the employee experience, but even in potentially attrition rates and retention and the like. And so I think that is going to be a very interesting trend to keep track of as what we're seeing in the landscape. And you've already mentioned too, kind of a little bit of this, but maybe speaking more directly to the pain chain that this can help solve, a smarter device strategy from ticket addiction to all the way up to the boardroom. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the whole idea of the pain chain I always love, because we tend to think of things in terms of how they impact us. Right. And we tend to think about it as like, my boss is asking me to do this, or I've got to do this, or this new project just came down. But if listeners aren't familiar with the pain chain, right, the concept behind the pain chain is the request that's coming to me is directly related to from my boss and a pain that my boss is feeling. And he has that pain, or he has that request on his desk because of his boss. And something that his boss is saying that this is something we want to achieve. And usually you can track it all the way back up to a CEO or even to the board of directors, right? So if I am an IT support desk leader and I have a challenge or a project that in the next 6 months we want to reduce ticket volume, by 20%. Well, that might be because my director has an OKR of that we need to see a 40% improvement in the efficiency of our support desk in closing, in mean time to resolution and number of tickets and all this. And he may have that because his boss is being challenged with showing a greater return on the IT investment that we're making into the support side of things. So he's asking, I want to see the optimization strategies. And the reason he's asking that, because the CIO has been told that they need to understand how we're going to achieve a 10% or greater return on the IT investment that we're making, and showcase the business value that each of these investments are making and how that's going to help us become more efficient down through the support desk. And he cares about that because the CFO is saying, We want to reevaluate all the investments that we're making and what the return on those investments are and how that return maps to our cost of capital or maps to or stacks up against other investments that we might be able to make. And the CFO is asking that because the CEO is saying that they want to improve operational efficiency and reduce spending by 20% over the next 4 quarters. And he's saying that because the board of directors is saying that they want to improve the return to shareholder value or XYZ. And if we can all step a little bit out of our bubble and walk in the shoes of those around us, sometimes we feel like we're playing a game of find the rock. But really the rock we're trying to find is not the rock around us that's going to make the next guy up the ladder happy, but what is it that might be the ultimate goal we're trying to achieve? And then we can start thinking about it's not just at the support desk. I'm not really being asked to reduce ticket volumes by 20%. What I'm being asked to do is to reduce the cost of operating the service desk by 20%, which means if I can get a 30% reduction in mean time to resolution, a 15% reduction in the number of support tickets coming in, and give my support specialist tools that let them close things in 1 call versus 2 or 3 calls, all of that's going to combine all the way up and be reportable up the ladder to the CEO. And I think it's important for everyone to be thinking about how do we make it easier? How does what we're doing now help the person above me and their boss's boss meet the objectives that they're trying to close out on?
There you have it. Yes, the circle of pain, and how could we all address our tasks more holistically with everyone else in mind instead of just kind of tunnel vision. So I love how you painted that. For our listeners at this point who are kind of like, yeah, Larry, this all sounds great. Maybe they're rolling their eyes, though. You've painted some great examples at how this has worked as HP, but, it's never going to happen for us, or how are we ever going to leverage this? Maybe they're in a government agency and they're always stuck on these long, 3 to 5 year procurement cycles. Could you share some real world examples of seeing this in success and practice, how it solved hidden productivity problems to kind of quell those skeptics?
Yeah, I actually think that the importance of telemetry is more important the longer the procurement cycle sits. Because the longer that the procurement cycle takes, the more important it is that you're actually making the right investments on there, because it may be 3, 4, or 5 years until you get to backtrack off of or make an adjustment to that cycle. I think if we can all agree, and this isn't Larry talking, if I look at research that came out of Deloitte that showed that roughly 45, 50% of all employees don't call IT when they're having issues with their support desk anymore. And Forrester published some research that showed that 34% of employees report that they have ongoing problems with their PCs or their technology that their service desk has never been able to fix. So put that into perspective, regardless of the investment that you're making and regardless of the procurement cycle, half of your employees don't even bother calling for help anymore. And we call them silent sufferers, right? Yes. And of all of your employees, a third of them have ongoing issues that they've been having that the service desk just hasn't been able to fix. And so we're not actually creating an environment where the employees feel like they have the right tools to do their job. I think in particular, when you get into very specific verticals or very hard, the longer cycles, right? When you are in government, the risk of an insecure posture, such as antivirus or firewall or anything being disabled or outdated, is even higher. The risk associated, like one of the tools we sell, Workforce Experience Platform, that Ironbow is using with a number of customers as well, has this ability to be extended for find, lock, and wipe, right? So when that device is lost, the ability to find it, lock it, and wipe it, and protect the data on it that sits in there. And so when I talk to customers, what I like to talk about is it's easy to talk in generics. It's easy to talk about, hey, doing a refresh of PCs on this, or doing identifying issues that are impacting CPU or memory utilization performance. But probably 30% of everything that happens at every company is fairly unique to them because of the internal tools that they have that are of their own, that they've either custom built or have been modified to work in their own network, or how they manage their IT department, how they manage the deployment. And I think in particular in some of the larger and more secure industries, I'll say government, finance, et cetera, you tend to get more of a stance of I don't separate. I don't really look necessarily at sentiment of employees of how they feel the technology is working. I'm looking at how the technology is working, and I just need to understand that they're performing well. Well, everything can be performing well, but not be meeting the needs or the expectations of the person using it. And so I think that when I think of those skeptics, I start thinking about, well, we're all going to do PC refreshes. That's just a fact of life. We're all going to do it. We all probably have sustainability departments that are challenging us with how do we get more out of the investments we make in plastics and silicone? How are we extending the life of some of these devices? And the programs that we have internally that start looking at what can be refreshed versus replaced, what can be redeployed versus thrown away, and understanding that. But the biggest thing is, what are the 3 to 4 use cases that you feel are unique to you, and call Ironbow and say, hey guys, these are the 3 problems we have. How can, based on what Fran and Larry said, how can telemetry help me solve these 3 things? And it's really hard to give a generic answer to that, because you could sit there and come back to me and say, you know what, I'm in a retail space and I have a large self-checkout endpoint. And when an endpoint goes down, we have a high walk-away rate where people will just leave stuff on the register and walk away. It's 20% of the time. And we have 30% of the time, something's wrong with that endpoint. Well, what if Ironbow could leverage something like Workforce Experience Platform to help you identify? It's like, hey, you know what? We can tell you which scanners are not working, which printers are not working, which scales are not working, which cameras aren't working. By the way, all of those are tied to that same retail endpoint. And we can help you identify the threats that are emerging so that you can avoid the downtime. Because for you, when that endpoint goes down, it's not that Fran's unhappy, it's that someone's not able to buy something. And how do you use that kind of telemetry to help manage that process through there? How do you make sure that the CEO isn't sitting in a meeting and his machine won't boot up because of bad driver or a bad BIOS update that went out, where you didn't leverage an AI simulator to look at where the problems might lie? And I think that's probably the biggest thing would be, generally we know you can save money. We know you can get 5 years, 6 years out of the PCs that you're investing in. We also know that after about 6 years, the cost of maintaining it and the tickets that it generates tend to be more than the cost of replacing it. So if you could take 40% of your fleet and get another year or 2 out of it, how does that help you manage your IT budget? If you can take 25% of your fleet and identify the right people to go to and refurb and redeploy, how does that help your sustainability story as a company? And then what other unique areas are you looking to try and identify areas to reduce friction? And let us know what those are, because then we can give you specific answers to the challenges you're facing that are beyond just a PC refresh or a peripheral refresh or support desk items.
I love how you kind of highlighted some best practices there for leaders and IT teams to get started. And I love the mention of the collaboration with Ironbow and HP and how we can help. So many good insights and chunks to take away here. Larry, if there's just one message you want IT leaders to take away from this episode, what would it be?
I think the biggest message I would give to IT leaders is never underestimate the importance of the value you have in the success of your company. IT is uniquely instrumental to not only the success of the company, but the success and the productivity of the employees that are going down there. And I think many times, especially the lower you go into IT, people feel unappreciated, and you're not. You're being looked at as someone who can help everyone be successful. That's number one. Number two is going to be, because we live in a world where there is increasing pressure to show business value in everything that we do. And any investment that we're making in IT is an investment that we're not making in something else. The strategic importance of understanding the data around how your technology investments are being used, how they're performing, which ones need attention in order to perform better, and being able to report up on what the return on that investment looks like from a lifespan perspective, from a return on that investment, and it could be cost savings or new deals that have come into play, all the way down into productivity metrics, which would include like a 20% reduction in downtime across the board for employees, are areas that you want to be able to uniquely highlight up the ladder and be able to tell people, here's how we're currently driving. But the beautiful thing about telemetry is it lets you show how you're responding to what's going on now, but it also gives you a roadmap into emerging threats and emerging opportunities where then as a leader in your business, you're coming forward and saying, here's the next 3 things that we need to be looking at doing from a technology perspective, a deployment perspective, and even a refresh perspective in order to drive better results and have a more productive workforce. Don't think about just the IT that they're using. Think about the people using it and talk about them, because that's who the CEO is trying to make happy. That's who HR is trying to make happy. And that's who facilities is serving. And that's who IT serves too. It's about the people that are using the technology that we give. And I still think to this day that IT is the linchpin that pulls together facilities and HR and departments like marketing and finance and others and all of those leaders to see how they're making sure that their employees are the best version of themselves and as productive as they can be.
I love that. I mean, IT being the linchpin of it all, and I sure can speak to even how dependent we are on our IT teams, even here at Iron Bow. I should have made that question 2 parts. So, speaking to what can employees do to better collaborate, and aside from not suffering in silence, what else would you advise for them? One key takeaway there.
It really comes down to a lot of the don't suffer in silence, right? It's like, we're all going to there's going to be challenges in this world. Sometimes it might be travel, sometimes it might be your technology, sometimes it might be both. Your IT teams cannot help you with things that they don't know about. So when you get the survey from IT, respond. Let them know where you're suffering and where you're not. When you're having a problem with the PC, let it be known. Let them know what it is, because if you let them know, then they can use tools like Workforce Experience Platform to then identify everybody else who is having a similar experience or a similar challenge, and not just resolve for you one employee, but you as the employee have now helped resolve it for the other 20% of your company who are going through the same thing. IT is here to serve employees. IT is here to serve the company. And IT will be as successful as the employees are. And we want to be your partner as the end user of the technology that we're putting out there. So tell us how we're doing. Tell us the challenges you're facing. Tell us the things that you can't do that you wish you could, because we'll go out and we'll figure out how to make it easier for you to do it. And that's our job, is to make you as productive as you can possibly be so that you can complete your job. And we don't want your machines going down, because we want you to be able to go home and be with your family, just like we want to go home and be with ours.
I love that. Shout out to all our IT teams. Thank you for helping all of us to make sure we're productive, being able to get our jobs done, and putting myself on blast here. Don't be like me, who's very slow to respond to the IT surveys and everything, and then calls the last minute for help. So don't be like me. Do better. Don't suffer in silence, and work with your IT teams. Larry, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining us here. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe to Tech in Translation on your favorite listening platform. For more insights into IT modernization, telemetry, smarter spending, and the employee experience, visit ironbow.com. Until next time.